Thank you again for joining us today, Mr. Thackeray. So we'll start off pretty macroscopically. What do you see as the biggest issue facing India today?
Firstly, thank you so much for hosting this out here in Mumbai, and I'm so glad to have all of you here. I hear you all are from different states of India, so many delegates coming here. Thank you for having so many young girls and boys out here to interact with all of us. I think it's an opportunity for us to really, keep in our hearts forever. I hope you keep inviting us, and I hope that the kind introduction that you gave gets kinder and kinder every year. So, right. So.
Yeah, so with regards to the first question, it's pretty broad, but essentially what you envision India's biggest challenge currently as?
I don't think, we should look at challenges. We should really be happy about the challenges, because when we took government right now, about a month ago, obviously there's a lot of challenges that we face across the state. And when we speak of a state like Maharashtra, which is so many different regions, religions, voices, professions coming together, for a government that really wants to work, or for younger people like us who really want to deliver or show that, okay, this is the legacy I've left when I, probably move on to something else later in life, I think challenges can be seen as a big opportunity for all of us. And with the population that we have, the young population that we have, obviously there is a lot of financial distress. You see a lot of unemployment. You see a lot of changes happening and disruptions happening in a country. But I think that's an opportunity for us to work on. So the challenges could be looked at as opportunities for us. So a changing world is a bigger opportunity for us.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that certainly can evolve into an opportunity, but nonetheless concerns, I think, the vast majority, if not all of the youth in the audience, is environmentalism. So environmentalism plays an integral role in your political advocacy. And the smog that blackens the skies of Delhi, the 2,700 trees that were cut in the RA colony, those just underscore the gravity of our climate crisis. So what specifically do you think India should do in order to advance its environmental policy, and is India on the right track?
To be honest, you said, challenges again. In environment, I think environment and economy are challenges we are facing today. If you look at what I said, unemployment. Obviously, after demonetization, after the sudden impact of GST, if you see all the financial conditions of all the states or the country, it was going up before that and shot down. How do we take it out of that is a matter of challenge. But along with that, how do we balance that with environment is a bigger challenge. And I think we should all look at something called sustainable development. For example, when we speak about the RA, right? The opposition we had and the stop work that we've given to is to the metro car shed in RA. Now, RA isn't only about trees. Obviously, I understand when you want to create highways, when you want to create dams, when you want to have infrastructure, somewhere you will have deforestation, and you cannot deny that, because you have lands which have forest areas which could be used for other uses. But the point is, do you really want to take away the city's floodplains and convert them into something which can be placed somewhere else as well? The environmental cost is extremely important. Look at Delhi right now. What New Delhi is facing, every city in India would start facing very soon, because today's political parties, we promise Wi-Fi hotspots. Most of our manifestos will have free Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi hotspots. In the next 5 years, if we don't change our track to sustainable development, we'll have to promise free oxygen hotspots. And look at the window outside. Look at the cityscape. Something we really relish or really cherish right now in the city is crisp sunlight. When you can go to the ceiling and see the landscape beyond it, when you can see buildings beyond it, that is a clear day. And how many days like that do we have in a city? So for a country like India, where we have a billion-plus population, where our population is divided evenly between urban and rural areas, where we have a lot of urbanization happening, initially we used to be scared of urbanization. It was a challenge for governments. Today, urbanization is being welcomed because there are certain facets we've got to it. For example, sanitation, solid waste management, river cleanups, water body rejuvenation. If we look at urbanization in a way which is sustainable, not just concretization, I think urbanization and what I would call ruralization, like a mix between both urban forests, urban farms, and these are facets of rural India which we could pull into our urban cities, and we could pull facets like, for example, solid waste management, river rejuvenation into rural areas. That is where we can strike the balance with the environment. A couple of years ago, when I brought in a ban on single-use disposable plastic, of course, we thought it would be a major challenge because we had to sit with every major industry to do with plastic, be it the water bottle industry, straws, food and beverage, service, bags, everything. But today, people have made it into a movement because people realize what a big challenge it is as a globe. On world politics or world environment, India is a huge landscape. India is, with its population, young population, looking at the future. And if we are looking to survive the next 100 years, we need to look at today. I think that is the bigger challenge in terms of environment.
So along those lines, you've incorporated this concept of a cost-benefit analysis, for instance, when examining this environmental issue. One of the driving factors behind the environmental degradation can be seen as economic greed. So when you think of deforestation, trees getting cut down, or even if you think of mining coal, these are examples of companies whose profit model revolves around those very acts that can be seen as environmentally catastrophic. So how do you think India can go about straddling that line between, sort of encouraging economic profit versus also saving the environment and taking care of its future that, way down the road could be experiencing some sort of catastrophe that emanates from
I
the
just think that
degradation?
we've come to a point where we realize that economic growth is extremely important. And obviously we want, economic growth in every country of the world. We want economic growth in every state of India. We want every, region in our state to be growing ahead economically. But whilst we do that, if we have no clean air to breathe, if we have no clean water to drink, if we have no food that is not mixed with plastic, what use is economic growth? And somewhere we need to strike a balance where, okay, there is growth, but there is sustainable and sensible growth. And that's some balance that most of the countries around the world are following. Look at places in Europe. I mean, some of the places have great solid waste management systems. You have effluent management systems. You have stormwater drains. You have that run into sewer treatment plants. So if we can do that, if we can put in check and balances on everything that we do, for example, governments have checks and balances. Our actions towards the environment are going to come towards us. And today, we're living in a world where climate change is real. I mean, we're in December right now, we're in January. And not even December, and we're in January, we don't feel the winters that we used to feel. There was heavy rainfall in December in Nagpur. You've had hailstorms, you've had so many storms, forest fires. The climate system is going crazy. And today, if we are actually trying to deny that, then we're roaming around with closed eyes. I remember watching a movie called The Day After Tomorrow, way back in 2003, 2004. And we all thought, okay, the day after tomorrow means about 150 years later, 200 years later. It's happening today, not even tomorrow. And there are reports where cities could go down below water. A city like Mumbai could be underwater by 2050. Now, we all have to adapt to climate change. It's gone beyond stopping it. But how do we adapt ourselves? Is just improve ourselves in our own actions towards the environment, because that is what we breathe, that is what we eat. We cannot create another environment.
What casts skepticism about that sort of sustainable development model, for instance, when you think of economic growth in India? So the past few decades can be characterized as roaring economic growth for India. But that economic growth has not necessarily benefited all Indians. So you see the rich getting richer in India, but consequently that exacerbates the sort of poverty gap, the sort of wealth inequality that India is already struggling with. So what do you think India can do in order to ameliorate that sort of widening economic inequality?
I think the only answer to disparity and reducing disparity or poverty alleviation is probably education. Because we often see that, newer industries are coming into India, newer jobs are being created, they're going to rural areas, they're going to semi-urban areas, they're going spreading out beyond cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, Chennai, Bengaluru. But once they do that, once an industry is set up in an area, are we really able to give jobs to the people who are around it? No, because we don't have skilling to that level. We don't have education that is creating jobs for us or bringing us jobs. We have a whole set of people who are young and ready to be employed, and there's a whole set of industries that need people who are skilled enough to be employed, and there's no connect between the two. There's a mismatch. If we can actually bring about a change or a reform in our education system, make it more career-oriented, get vocational training into it, get skilling into it, create hubs of industries, and then have universities set up around it. For example, if you create a hub of aviation, you have education around it, which is pro-aviation, or the ancillary industries. If you have something to do with agriculture, why not create an industry chain and an education that supports it, where you can actually get something into agricultural jobs and move beyond it? So I think one of the biggest challenges for us is to create education reforms that are actually pro-industry, pro-environment and pro-future. That is where we are holding back right now. I mean, look at some of the research that happens in our country. Most of it happens in government organizations. Most of it happens in ISRO and DRDO. While the world around, you have research and innovation happening in schools and colleges. Can we change that as Indians to having our colleges or schools have innovations in, be it agriculture, be it in seed technology, be it in urban landscape, be it in education or healthcare? If we can achieve that, that is where the real change for the youth will come in. Not just pulling in industries. I mean, that is something we need to do, of course. But along with that, what is happening to the base that will be employed in those industries?
So we've spoken about environmentalism, we've spoken about economic inequality as formidable challenges facing India. We also sent all of the delegates in the audience a poll to sort of see what sort of issues they had on mind and what sort of challenges they were particularly focused on. And one of the issues that we resoundingly got was the heated controversy surrounding CAA. Of course, that CAA controversy has engulfed India, and millions of youth around India have decided to take to the streets to voice their convictions. What do you think CAA means for India, and how is it in India with CAA different than in India without CAA?
I think that is the question we've asked the government exactly. What are we actually trying to achieve with CAA? Because yes, we're giving citizenship to refugees, we're giving citizenship to persecuted people. However, could we do that without dividing India? I think that is the primary question, because if you see a couple of policies that have come into India in the last 5 or 7 years where we've actually asked for clarifications, and a lot of media houses or the government today in the center, if you question them, you're taken to be as anti-nationals, and for the fear of being tagged anti-national as well, we've asked questions, be it pertaining to CA, be it relating to demonetization, or GST that was implemented in a way which was so haphazard. Today, these policies have actually divided India into not just rich versus poor, that is a division that was brought in by demonetization, which made it more visible. You've got India divided into different castes, creeds, sects, religions, and with every new decision, we're dividing India. I mean, of course, we want to help people around the world, but one of the most important questions is today when in India faces, we have a country where we are facing farmer distress, we're facing unemployment, we are facing people who cannot eat 2 square meals a day. The point is, if you can't look after your own people, can you afford to bring in people from around the world or from our neighboring countries and give them food? Are we ready for that? And would there be not more pressure on them to leave their country and come into us once we openly start accepting them? We don't mind giving, amnesty or refuge or asylum to a lot of people around the world, and probably we already do. But the question is, what is the intent? Could there be no dialogue with political parties or with members of parliament who actually represent so many people from, across India?
And so concentrating a little bit more on the ideological
Beyond that, is CA and NRC going to be linked? And there is so much, chaos within the cabinet in the center. The Home Minister speaking one thing, the Prime Minister saying one thing, the spokesperson is saying one thing. Where is clarity in this?
Yeah, and so with regards to that sort of clarity, that creates a lot of ambiguity also about the ideological essence of what CAA represents. So you have...
It's not just, it doesn't just question our ideals as government, but also, the atmosphere that will be created for foreign investors, for people who want to study in India, for people who want to invest in India. How are they going to look at India globally when you look at India which is burning today, where you have paramilitary forces out on the streets, where you have so much tension out of the streets? And obviously a lot other states, like for example Maharashtra, there's hardly any tension because we allowed people to protest peacefully. We let people come and voice their views. But where you have police who was ordered to go into a university and fire at students, how is the globe going to look at us?
And that's a very interesting point you raise. For instance, a lot of the Ivy League universities in India, like in the United States, signed on to this petition sort of condemning India's response to the CAA protests and what appeared to be a crackdown on student dissent. So throughout India, you've seen purportedly violent protests being taken down by paramilitary forces, as you mentioned. Do you think that students who are going to the streets and raising their voices, are they doing so effectively, or is there another mechanism that they should use in order to make the change they want?
I just think that, protest is a form of democracy. And obviously you have a right to protest. As long as it's peaceful, it's happening in a way. And, the government is nobody to tag it right or wrong, because a protest is a protest. However, there's a way to deal with the protests where you can meet the protesters, you can, have an interaction with them. And today when the country is asking questions, when the parliament is asking questions, agreed there is a rightful majority for a particular party in the parliament, but yet there is a parliamentary democracy. And when you're placing something on the table of the parliament, you ought to answer the parliament, you ought to answer every question that is placed in the parliament in front of you. So be it a protest on the street, be it some MP who is an independent MP, has no other strength with him, but he represents his people. He represents Indian people who have voted for him. And if we are talking of bringing in people from other countries into India, why is the government, not bothered about answering Indians?
Yeah. And so, talking about issues that the global media at large has been emphasizing pertaining to India, one, of course, has been the crackdown on CAA. And lots of people around the world are concerned that the whole CAA issue exemplifies this wave of Hindutva that seems to be sweeping the country. And so the Shiv Sena, of course, is fundamentally rooted in Hindu ideology. And so these voices have been expressing a sort of nervousness about the fervent wave of Hindutva that's been taking over. And so in response to those concerns, how would you describe the Shiv Sena's relationship with Hindutva?
Firstly, our Hindutva is a lot more different than what BJP's Hindutva is. I don't even think that is Hindutva, because as personal experience of a party, I can be very frank with you, lying to a political ally and doing something else isn't Hindutva. That doesn't fit into the ideals of my religion. Two, our belief in Hindutva is almost like any other party across the world which may have a particular religious affiliation, but obviously it's not infringing upon anyone else. I'm not going to tell you to eat something or not eat something. I don't have any right to tell you that, okay, you can marry this person or not marry this person. I don't have any right to tell you what to wear and not to wear, or where to go and not to go. That is your free will. And that is what governments are supposed to do. As a political party, everyone has ideologies around the world. You'll have the leftists, you'll have the rightists, you'll have the centrists, you'll have Lib Dems, you'll have, every other political party. But when you're in government, there is a certain way that you run government in. You keep a clarity of thought where anyone who comes to you for help or for work or for your regular duties that you have to implement as government, you do it without fear or favor, and you do it without any bias in your mind, and that is what a government is for. Ideologies are for, obviously, you have a shade of ideology where you believe in something, and there are people who believe in that ideology, will vote for you, and there are certain good things that you do from that ideology which you can implement in the country. But not infringe upon someone else's right, and that is where we completely differ from the BJP.
And so you have it.
What is happening right now, be it the CAA, whatever is happening right now in terms of sending in armed personnel into a university and shooting at kids, that is not Hindutva, as per whatever I've learned at least.
Yeah. And so you have acknowledged that the Shiv Sena, of course, has some sort of religious affiliation, like a lot of political parties across the world. You've also expressed concern regarding the BJP's current embodiment of what Hindutva means to them.
We've spoken against mob lynching when someone was, apparently caught eating beef or not eating beef. They lynched the guy to death.
Yeah.
That is something that doesn't fit into a religion. No religion in the world would speak about that.
Yeah. But and so, even though you are apprehensive about sort of the BJP's actions being considered any sort of reflection of religion, nonetheless, it is objectively true that the BJP has been trying to perpetuate more of a Hindu ideology, trying to sort of Hindufy per se India, and that has posed a challenge, if not undermined, the secular values upon which India was founded.
So I have no issues with any particular party or any prime minister or president speaking about his religion. You have the president of the United States going to a church. You have the head of state, which is the queen, who is the head of a church as well. And you can obviously be proud of your religion, go to any temple, mosque, church, whichever, if you're an atheist as well, you can just go to your religion, you can seek solace in your religion. But the point is, today what this isn't what Hindutva is. And that is what I'm differing on with the BJP.
Now that we're talking about the BJP, actually, let's just talk about the BJP-Shiv Sena relationship.
Haven't we spoken enough?
Yeah. I think what I'm...
And I'm sure everyone's heard enough in the last 1 month. We've had enough of them.
I think the one thing I do want to touch on, though, is that there has been this shift, obviously, towards Congress and the NCP, and So do you think that this marks the sort of end of what was once a strong marriage between the BJP and the Shiv Sena, in the sense that now that you've gravitated towards Congress, the NCP, that their relationship sort of has closed its doors?
I wouldn't call it a marriage because even though I'm unmarried, I'm young and whatever, but young and single, but marriages are a beautiful thing. I wouldn't like to call it troubled marriage, but I mean, the friendship wasn't fully of trust as much as we thought we could trust them. And yeah, bygones be bygones, we've moved on. We've got into an alliance with the Congress and the NCP and a couple of more allies, and we've got on to setting an agenda that is actually for every person of the state. And yes, we come from different ideologies. The Congress and the Sena have been on different poles of ideologies, but I think that is the beauty of democracy, where two different ideologies can come together for a particular state, and whenever there is an issue or an issue to tackle or a policy that will come ahead, two different differing ideologies will be sitting in the same cabinet room and discussing it through different perspectives. I mean, this is the beauty of our democracy, where you have different perspectives. It's chaotic, but it's going to be beautiful because you'll have two different perspectives making one policy. That is how we look at it.
Yeah. And so you've emphasized the significance of having a bunch of different ideologies sort of coalesce and sort of mesh together. And if you look at India right now, the BJP has quite a tight stronghold. Of course, India is the world's largest democracy, provides everyone the opportunity to voice what they believe.
Are we still a democracy?
That's a good question.
Are we?
Do you think so?
That's good. I think this government proves it.
Do you think that the BJP having a stronghold, despite being democratically elected, that has negative ramifications on India?
Not really. See, a democratically elected government is one that is elected by the people. But finally, what happens is you have a certain manifesto that you have to go with. And when you start destroying basic institutions, when you start bringing disruptions without taking much care of what are the negative effect of those disruptions, I think that is where the concern lies. For example, demonetization is probably the biggest blunder in post-independent India. We've had, if you go through any financial review of any state, you'll see the country's financial system go up, the economy go up, and then 2017 just shoot down. And we haven't been able to come out of it, neither has anybody got solutions. GST, there's a huge shortfall for compensation to states because there's a shortfall for the revenues that used to go up to the center. I think these systems, when they were brought into place, a little more discussion, debate with the people, with parties, be it your allies, be it the opposition party, I think that could have helped India go ahead, because obviously there is a majority given by the people. Everyone should respect that. Everyone respects that. But the majority is obviously a reflection of the people's trust in you, and you need to behave in a way that you can maintain the trust with.
Switching gears a little bit and looking at the audience, the vast majority, actually all of them, are definitely constituting the Indian youth. The vast majority fall within an age category of approximately 20 years old to 25 years old. And so as the youngest minister in the Maharashtra cabinet, you're a clear embodiment of the power that youth can have in Indian politics. You've been invested in empowering youth. As we mentioned, you have Aaditya Thackeray. And what propelled you to become the first Thackeray in 3 generations to contest the polls? And what is your advice for the youth in the audience, many of whom are seeking political careers down the road, on how to really enter the political fray?
I think I'm not old enough to give advice. I've not yet touched 30, and it'll take me about 6 months to touch 30. But I think what is really important, if anyone really wants to get into politics or whichever field, I wouldn't say that everyone should come into politics, because every profession is equally important. And we need to have thought leaders, we need to have innovative leaders in different professions. We need whatever you can wake up to with passion every Monday morning, and you don't want to have a holiday on Sunday. I think that is your calling. Be it art, be it dance, be it any form of sports, be it politics. And that's how I was pulled into it. Obviously, being from a political family, there's always been this whole atmosphere of politics within my family. None of my cousins felt like getting into it, so they were obviously not really into it. At the age of around 18 or 19, I had faced a teacher's strike in my own college. And about 55 days into it, we realized 5 more days and we would waste a year. And that's how I led a delegation without telling my father to the governor. And that's where I started getting into it, because I've always seen my grandfather, my father, so many leaders, so many people who were from common backgrounds. And obviously they made it to huge positions only because they could come into electoral politics or politics. And this is one field where you can actually change or impact 1 billion lives through one decision. And that's what really attracted me to this. I mean, I often joke about it, but if it's that Batman feeling. You've helped someone, 50 other people don't know, but the person you've helped and you know that, and you have that satisfaction. One of the closest examples in recent times I could give you is one of the social media Twitter handles that we started for Mumbai. Now, Mumbai is a populated city. Mumbai is, a city which is obviously industrial. You've got a lot of people coming in every single day from all across India, all across the world. You've got different ideas in Mumbai. People see it as a city of dreams. And while doing that, you already have a lot of small issues with the city where you're walking on a street and the garbage dump isn't picked up, or there's a manhole somewhere, there's a pothole somewhere. And as a citizen, you're always wondering where to go, where to complain, how to get this addressed, how to get this addressed. And we started My BMC as a social media handle. Every single day, you've got thousands of tweets on My BMC where you have a picture of that garbage dump or a pothole addressed to My BMC saying, hey, what about this? This is not cleaned. Within 2 hours, you have a reply from the BMC saying, oh, it's cleaned or it's repaired. And I think seeing that work happen, every single night I go through that, and that gives me great satisfaction. Okay, someone had a smile on the face today. I think that is why you should come into politics, and only if you believe in that, that is the only reason you should come into politics. How to come into politics is, of course, you start taking up one of the issues that really hits you, or you feel really passionate about, and people start noticing you. Once people start noticing you, political parties start noticing you. And that's how you move into electoral politics. And with me coming into electoral politics was actually a funny story. I mean, I've always wanted to be a part of electoral politics. For the last 10 years, where I couldn't contest elections because of my age, I used to go to the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha, the state assembly out here, look at a lot of colleagues, speak in the house, deliver on issues. And with me, it's become, when you have your father in politics and you're in politics, normally across the world, you have dynastic politics going. Your father's first elected, then you were elected. With me, it was the other way. It was reverse dynasty. I got elected first and then my father.
And so, India has a lot of youth, to say the least. Around 600 million Indians are younger than 25. In fact, by the end of this year, a third of the world's youth is projected to be in India. And so you've spoken a lot about this and you've spearheaded a lot of initiatives, but I wanted to hear what specifically you think India can do to better serve its youth.
I think A, education, B, education, C, education. And this is something which is really important because education reforms will reach out to every person. Across rural India, across urban India, every gap that is in India today can be filled by education. If we give quality education, if we give modern education, if we give education that has no bias, which is forward-looking but is implemented today, if it is something which is a mix of global and regional education, I think that is what we need to look at because one of the political heroes that I look at by myself is Mr. Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Britain. And in his time, he actually reformed education. A lot of things are spoken about his time in politics. They speak about the NHS, they speak about the wars, they speak about a lot of things. But no one really focuses on what he did for UK through education. If we really can focus on our education system, change the education system, make it uniform, yet diverse, like, for example, uniformity across India, but there are local issues that you can take and regional adaptations that you can take, and I think that could really change India and help the youth.
Yeah, and so, education nonetheless remains an unaffordable luxury for a lot of Indians. What initiatives do you think the Indian government can spearhead in order to make that education sphere more inclusive for all?
So I'll tell you what we do in the Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, because obviously we've just settled into the Maharashtra government and it's been a month and we want to reform education here. But in the last 15 years, and especially in the last 7 or 8 years, the reforms that we've brought into Municipal Corporation of Mumbai, we've got 1,232 schools, we've got about 800,000 students, we've got 8 or 9 languages, English, semi-English, Marathi, Hindi, Gujarati, Urdu, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada. We've looked at technology as a major medium of learning today. We've got 49,000 kids from 8th standard, 9th standard, 10th standard learning on tabs in 5 different languages. We've connected 500 schools via virtual classrooms through satellite technology with one studio. So you have one teacher teaching 500 classrooms in one go. So for example, there was this one school I was inaugurating in Vadala, a renovated school, of course, and obviously we've tied up with the Marylebone Cricket Club, we've tied up with the Lord's Cricket Club, then we've tied up with the Royal Dance Academy, we've tied up for FIFA, for gender equality, hygiene, sanitation, football. We've got a lot of extracurriculars, but what we've done through this virtual classroom is something I think we could replicate across Maharashtra and across India, because then you have quality education going across the state or across the country. For example, this one school I was inaugurating in Vadala, it was an English, Marathi and Urdu school. And when I entered the classroom, the kids were learning algebra in Urdu on a screen. I mean, I've never understood algebra first. Then the medium was in Urdu, and then you have it on screen. But the kids were picking it up. And I think these technology solutions or these disruptions are the ones we could really use to bolster education in
Yeah,
the
I think
country.
we can all agree with that. In fact, we should get a huge round of applause for that kind of accomplishment in India. And so finally, before we switch over to audience questions and answers, just want to provide you the opportunity, all the youth in the audience. I'm certainly feeling inspired. I'm sure I can speak on behalf of all the delegates, but do you have any last words, any sort of advice for the audience before we head over to audience
No,
Q&A?
not really. I think we could go into the questions. Because
Awesome. So then without further ado, let's have our delegates raise their hands if they have any questions, and we can have the mic runners select some of the respondents.
A lovely afternoon to the panel. We are really happy to hear such straight opinions out here and being a part of the activism going out. I'm really happy. And I would like to ask a serious and straight question. When we call our country secular, we know that there are a lot of laws with different religions. We know there are given a lot of sensitivity to religions. When we call secular, why do we put it on formal forms and not keep it informal?
So the whole understanding of secular could move from one state to another or from one country to another. For example, we could also believe that secularism is believing proudly or being proudly your own religion, practicing your form of religion, but not infringing on the other's religion. That is the form we have chosen to adapt. Countries like, for example, France, where you've got niqabs or burqas banned, that is the state is the religion, and you have religion which is kept in your own house, and you respect the religion of the state. So you obviously have different interpretations of secularism. With all the isms around the world, if you see communism, if you see capitalism, if you see secularism, all the types of isms, be it to do with religion or forms of government, all countries have adapted different interpretations of that, whatever suited them best, and gone ahead with that. So, I mean, we have a different interpretation, of course.
I'm actually going to butt in with just one quick question there. I think that's a very interesting point that was raised. And so, in your interpretation of secularism, and as you mentioned, that kind of can change from country to country, individual and individual. But in your definition of secularism, do you think today's India is still secular?
It more or less is, because finally everyone celebrates their own religion. As long as you don't have religious discord, it's all good. And if you see this one stretch, I mean, I am making a cultural spine out there. We're creating a walking pathway there in Mahim. That is actually a beautiful place. We're calling it the cultural spine, and that is a project I've undertaken right now. Mithi is where this walking pathway starts, pedestrian pathway starts. You have the Mithi River, which is the mouth of the Mithi, and Mithi is central to a lot of Mumbai's, floods, beauty. We are trying to rejuvenate the Mithi, so obviously it'll become a tourism spot. So that's where it starts. You have the Arabian Sea to the west. You come down, the first thing you see is the church in Mahim. And, that is the first place where you have a Wednesday Mass, you have Novena going on there, you've got Christmas being celebrated there. You move ahead, you have a Dargah of Maghdum Shah Baba, and you have his own feast and festival going on there. You come down, you have the Shivaji Park, which is central to Mumbai's politics. And then you come down, you obviously have the Ambedkar Memorial, you have the Savarkar Memorial, you have Aaditya Thackeray Memorial, and then the final destination on that cultural spine is the Siddhivinayak Temple. So you've got almost everything that Mumbai really resonates and speaks about or lives on that cultural spine.
We'll take a question further down the back. Yep.
So first of all, it's an honor to be talking to you, not just because you're a minister, but also because you're 29 and you're a minister. So, so my only question here is that, so do you think that the Indian demography that actually votes for its leaders, will they be able to accept youth leaders and politicians? considering their lack of experience?
I think by and large, we are accepting younger people. I mean, if you see some of our younger politicians, they are, of course, we haven't defined an age for youth today. I mean, we call 50s also youth, we call 40s youth. But, and then we say, dil se jo youth hai, wo youth hai. But a lot of people who are interested, see, till now, we used to be away from politics as young men and women because we always thought that politics was bad. But we've stopped abusing politics. We've started using politics. When you start realizing that you can deliver with politics, I think that's the time, first of all, we should accept politics as a means of change. That's when people will start believing in us.
We'll take a question over here.
Could you also mention, roughly where you come from and all? So that's very curious because 26 states are participating, and I think that's very interesting.
No, absolutely. I think we already have, yeah, perfect.
Good evening.
Oh, no. Let's go with her first, and then.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you so much, sir. So the question that I had in mind is that since you're a young leader in our parliament, and it's a great opportunity to have been speaking to you, my question is regarding the Sustainable Development Goals. And since all of us belong to the millennial generation, we're all concerned about
Sorry, the
climate
voice,
change.
can you hear the question? It's actually.
All right, so since we all belong to the millennial generation, we're all concerned about climate change. So since you're a young person who is in the parliament and is capable of taking pertinent decisions which can primarily assist in curbing the fear that we live in terms of climate change. So sir, is there any idea which has inspired you to take change and which will go a long way in taking steps to curb climate change? Because I have been an intern in the SDG India study, wherein I found that the statistics that we have at the moment are very low in comparison with other countries. So what do you think we should do to improve that index, the SDG index in India?
So of course the SDGs, we need to go by them because they're beautifully mapped and beautifully placed, and I mean, very roughly, they're very colorful, but that's how governments see them. We need to start understanding them and take them to the last person who it should be reaching out to. About climate change, please sit, I'll answer the question. About climate change, I think the first thing we need to really know and understand is we need to accept that climate change is here. Like I said, when I watched that movie, The Day After Tomorrow, I think, I thought back then, okay, the day after tomorrow means 150 years after me, things like that. We need to realize that it's today, it's happening today, and we have very few years to not correct that. We cannot go correcting climate change because we've gone beyond that. Today, what we need to do is adapt to climate change. Climate change is no longer just two poles melting and creating a rise in water levels across the country, across the globe. Today, climate change is in every sphere of life, be it public transport, be it farming, be it rains out here disrupting city life. There is climate change in every aspect of our life. So when we look at climate change, obviously there is the finance ministry or the audit that happens through the finance ministry, where you have one person auditing every expense of the departments of the government of India or the government of different states. Likewise, there should be a person from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change auditing every action of every department of the government and its impact on climate change. I think that is where we can really start making an impact. Obviously, we have things like trying to curb air pollution. We have policies where you have a ban on single-use disposable plastic. You have greening that is happening. For example, one of the policies that we've really initiated in the city of Mumbai is to have urban forests, where we've taken 66 plots and we're planting about 400,000 trees. Yes, we need to create spun cities. Spun cities is, that is something I've put up in the Urban Development Ministry yesterday as well, when I was speaking to different municipal commissioners across the state, where you can have greener areas, where you can have rainwater harvesting, but also rainwater percolation. But how do we adapt to climate change? How do we adopt climate change? How do we change ourselves to climate change is something we need to really broadly think upon, where you have, for example, the housing industry, the real estate industry. When we're making new housing societies, when we're making newer policies for housing, we need to adapt things like natural sunlight, solar energy. If we can bring in something like the STPs into our own systems of toilet water being reused, we need to have greening in those areas. So these are places where policy changes need to occur towards climate change, because like you rightly said, today if we can have a linkage between poverty elevation and climate change? Can we have a linkage between transport and climate change? Can we have a linkage between urbanization or rural decay and climate change? That is where we would move ahead.
Thank you. There was a delegate who had also stood up for the mic. Yeah, we got a question from him.
Good evening, panel. It's a delight to be talking to you. So my question is regarding to something that happened in the recent Maharashtra elections. I wanted to ask you.
There was a climate change there as well.
So, as in when an alliance, which was formulated in the before pre-elections and breaks down after the elections, but the voters having voted not for a single party but for the alliance as a whole. So for them, it somewhat seems unfair. So how do you think this can be justified to the voters?
So when voters vote for a particular alliance, they also work and vote for the principles of the alliance and the basis of what alliance was formed on. If an alliance is an electoral, adjustment that two parties make, saying, okay, if he and I are into an alliance, he won't contest in where I am contesting, I won't contest where he is contesting. But when the alliance partner actually puts up 70 candidates who are rebels into the alliance partner's seats to try to reduce the alliance partner's seats, that is where the first principle of alliance is broken. When the alliance partner actually has promised something before the Lok Sabha alliance, and then goes on breaking one promise after the other, the first promise being of half and half seat share. That was broken. The other promise was about half and half government and ministries. That was broken, and the chief ministership was broken. If the principles are broken in an alliance, the voters who've actually voted for the alliance have also voted for both the partners, not just one partner, right? So both the partners work on a principle and trust. If the trust and principle is broken, then I believe that the voters will always choose to be with the principled ones than the ones who have broken the trust and principle.
Thank you. We'll go with a question all the way at the back. Yep.
Hello. Yeah. So my question is, whatever you said
Can't
about
see you.
A little bit louder,
Oh,
please.
there.
I'm at the
Hi.
last. Hi. So my question is, whatever you said about the BMC schools, what are your views on the staggering rate in which children are dropping out of BMC schools and parents preferring private schools over public schools?
So obviously, we have been trying to revamp the BMC schools in the last few years. There's a lot of dilapidated schools also, and every year we take about 60 schools into renovation. About the dropout rates, I was studying a couple of foundation reports and NGO reports, and then we tried to delve deeper into it. Most of the all BMC school education is free, firstly. But the dropouts also, the reason for dropouts is two primarily. One is some of the BMC school students who drop out are from families who are migrating from one place to another. When they're working in Mumbai, they will be studying in a BMC school. When they move from one place to another, or when they go back to the native villages or native towns, it is seen as a dropout. And two, there's a lot of belief still in our society today that, selling things on the street through children can earn them more money. So, there have been instances where I have offered little kids selling me flowers or toys or whatever on the streets, asking them, do you want to be enrolled in the BMC school? And they're like, sir, by the time I get educated and study and, by the time I'm graduating from my college, I would have wasted about 15 to 20 years of my life not earning. I'm earning right now for my family, and that is sustaining a family. So we need to strike a balance, like I said, where we can reform really education to bring about, awareness that this will give you some form of employment to the other. And there's obviously the awareness that you need to bring into the parents where education is really crucial.
Thank you. We'll go with the, with the question over there. And just a reminder also, when you're asking a question, just say your name and just say where you're from and maybe what you do, if you're a student or if you're a professional.
Yeah, which college or, yeah.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Garvit Anand. I live in Surat and I am studying in West Bengal. It was highlighted during the discussion that a necessity as basic as education is not accessible to all the sections of the society. And for that, the government has been...
Sorry, necessity is basic as?
Education is not accessible to all the sections of the society, and for that, the government has been introducing various reforms and schemes. My question to you is that, do you feel that the current system of reservation in educational institutions and various other sectors is efficiently able to cater just to the needy without depriving the deserving ones of the opportunity and without catering to the ones who do not really need to benefit from that?
So this has always been a complex issue in our country. And for example, where you've had a lot of religions or castes that have been remaining different or away from the society at large, and they need to be brought into the mainstream. And that is why reservations came into our country for the first time. My grandfather has always voiced this and I always believe that, do not attach labels to anyone. Anyone who is in need should be given support. For example, anyone who is economically backward should be given support, irrespective of what his caste, creed, background, religion, language is. And yes, I think slowly as a country we're moving towards that thought, but we need to integrate all people from all across the country into the mainstream first as we move on to that. I think more and more hands are coming up as we...
We have a question at the girl at the side over here. Yep, perfect.
Hello, sir. It's my honor to be talking to you. So my question is, what are your views on the current education system? So I'm an engineering student. I'm currently in my 3rd year. And so do you feel it's hindering innovation in our country? Absolutely. And do you think we should create more awareness about certain topics such as climate change, women's rights, and introduce that into our education system?
Okay, so be prepared for 15 minutes. But this is something I really feel passionate about, and I've been trying to work in my own way, because we need to segregate education firstly into 3 different pillars of education. One is the infrastructure that we have in our country. Like I said, with BMC schools, with government schools, with a lot of schools across the country that are owned or semi-owned by the government or local urban bodies, we need to revamp them to a basic sense or basic aesthetic sense where kids feel like going to those schools. Because very often when we go on surprise visits, we see a tube light is broken, a fan is not working, or a computer is not working in the computer lab, science labs are locked up, or you have a water drinking spout right next to a bathroom. So we need to firstly have a major focus area on renovating these schools, making them more likable by students, and something where you have students who can really hang around the campus later and chill, probably learn more, have libraries that are open source, libraries that are digital. So that is one thing that we need to look at. The other aspect, which is the 3rd aspect I will come on before I go on to the second one, is the extracurricular. Obviously, we need to also look at things like sports. When I say we need self-defense for girls, at the same time, we also need right touch, wrong touch, and behavior studies for the boys as well, because it's going to be a balance of both. We need to bring in systems like sports, we need to bring in systems like teamwork, we need to bring in thought processes like gender equality, sanitation, hygiene, mental health care into our schools, because a lot of our schools also come from a strata where a man or a husband beating his wife is thought to be okay or the norm of the society. So we need to eradicate that thought process from the school. And obviously then the second pillar is where we look at school, which is school to college education, or KG to PG, kindergarten to post-graduation, in a way which is a little more global, you could say global, because you need to have one uniform system across the country, which is your basics, like for example, math, geography, your English, your local language, your vernacular language, all these things have to be uniform across the country. They cannot change. Your English cannot differ from one state to another. Your math cannot differ from one place to another. Obviously, I would argue about geometry and algebra, but that is a different thing. That has to be uniform, and that has to be as per the international standard. But then within things like history or say local geography, you could have little dashes or little colors of local history, local geography, where a student could be more interested in studying his local region than some neighboring state. So I think that is something we need to look at. Education has to be, today, education has to be more career-oriented. Education has to have aspects like climate change, gender equality. I think that is where education has to change. One of the most important things that I think we need to change in our college systems is liberal education has to come into our country. And when I say liberal education, it's something like, for example, like liberal arts. For example, when you study abroad, when you study in the US, or when you study in any other country of the world, you can really take politics. You can take politics or philosophy with photography, or you can take geography with biology. This interdisciplinary education, along with an education that helps us to think and question. Today, when you question things in the class, you are thrown out of the class. The fact that you can actually question, like I've done ICSE, I've been through IB, and I've done the Indian education system in my college. What I really loved about the IB is you have different levels of education where you can be interested in one subject, or you can be really good at one subject, and you could take something like French on ab initio level. So these are things that you need to have. You need to be firm and flexible both within an education system. So that is one. And finally, like you really hit the nail on the head, is innovation. Because if you look at the Time magazine at the end of the year, and this is what I've really been, always very lost about, is you look at the top 10 innovations of the world, and most of these innovations are coming from colleges and schools and universities. And then, like I said earlier, you look at the innovations from India, you have that coming from either extremely high-end universities or from something like ISRO or DRDO. And the gestation time also is something around 2 to 5 years. We need to have our students innovating, we need to have our students researching, we need to have our students questioning the set norms of today. Because it is the same batch of, Indian students who go abroad and excel and thrive because the fact that we can question things, we can question set norms, we can actually educate ourselves better. We need to give that opportunity to students to actually question, innovate, research, and thrive in that education system.
And we'll have time for actually one more question. Do we have, yeah. Over there. Over there. Just, yeah.
It's a pleasure talking to you, sir. I am a
Thank
third
you.
year BTech undergraduate from IIT Bombay. And I have a question adding to that reservation one. Like, I have two friends. One of them belongs to a reserved category. The second one is a general student. So the reserved category student, he comes from an economically advanced background. Like, his father earns a lot. He holds an iPhone. Then I ask, I wanted to always ask to someone who is in power to do so, that why does he need reservation? We provide reservation so that they would be given, if they don't have resources, they should come forward. But if someone is economically not poor, why should he deserve reservation?
Like I said, like I said earlier, this is about absolutely having a policy where you start having a discussion within the society, and that's where these ideas, whether you really need it or don't need it, what is the threshold you need it at, what is the qualification of needing it, do you really need it, how will it be implemented? I think these things really need to be discussed on a greater scale because there's a lot of for and against, and wherever there's a for and against, in a country like ours, we need to have a larger discussion on that. I'm really happy that there is an open discussion on this now.
I think we have time for one more question.
I'm good.
Okay,
I'm just
perfect.
playing
Yeah.
around with it.
Okay, we'll take one more question. We'll take the girl over here on the side. Can we get a mic runner over there? The girl on the side over here. Perfect.
Sir, a year ago I read a headline telling that Aaditya Thackeray is just another boy who fits the Sobo culture rather than the Maharashtra Legislative Assembly. And very recently, I read a headline telling that Aaditya Thackeray is the changing face of Shiv Sena politics. How was the journey like? So, were you a reluctant politician like your father Uddhav Thackeray, or like what genuinely inspired you to come into electoral politics?
So the fact that I've not felt much of a change means that it's been a very nice journey, and it's been a natural one. About my father, it's actually one of the. So there are a couple of political people I look at, and not just because he's my father, but as a politician where he speaks less and listens to people more, and he chooses to do that because often what happens in our country is people who speak more or create more noise are taken to be politicians, and people who hear people are not taken to be politicians. I think my father's just the reverse, and whatever we've come to in the last 10 years, of course, my grandfather was behind a major power center. But the fact that he's created his own place, there is a place where he's created a balance between listening and talking. And today's government is also about a lot of listening to the people. I think that's where I take a major inspiration from. About electoral politics, I am still the boy that I am. I mean, he's looking more of a politician that I am and more of a minister that I possibly I am. But my father's always told me that, don't change who you are. Be the normal guy that you've always been. Be the guy next door that you've always been. The moment you start wearing things different only because you're a part of government or opposition or government or minister, that's when people will start disconnecting from you. Never change who you are. Never start raising yourself beyond the ground. I mean, always stay humble. So the journey between the regular Mumbai boy, the journey between a guy who goes across the country, across the state, across the globe, seeking new ideas, trying to listen to more people. I still am that. In my head, I haven't changed, and hopefully I won't change in my behavior as well. So I think the headlines would be mixed ahead and the same.
A huge round of applause for Aaditya Thackeray, please. As a token of our appreciation, we have a little gift that I'd like to present.
Oh, thank you so much for interacting with me.